Hi, this is Mark Glazer, Executive Editor of PBS MediaShift. Welcome to another edition of the MediaTwits. This week we're going to be talking about Aereo, startup that's going to the Supreme Court. The broadcasters have taken them to court over their service where they have tiny antennas that help people stream broadcast content over their mobile devices and over their TV and time shift that content. Is what they're doing legal or just a curious and interesting way to get around copyright laws? Those oral arguments were heard at the Supreme Court on Tuesday. We'll talk a little bit about that and what the future of Aereo and the future of time shifting and cloud computing might be in the wake of a ruling coming in June. We'll also talk a little bit about Netflix, and it's had a great quarter and will be raising prices, and now has also complained about AT&T and the speed of the service through AT&T. And meanwhile, AT&T is taking on Netflix by putting $500 million into a joint venture with the Chernin Group to create kind of its own streaming service. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. First, I want to introduce our panel on the show today. We've got Alki David, CEO of FilmOn, joining us.
Good afternoon. Nice to see you.
You too. We've got Andrew Lee from American University, decked out and joining us. We have Ben Collins from Esquire joining us as well. And we've got Dan Rayburn from Streaming Media joining our discussion. So first, let's talk about Aereo. They've been, started by Barry Diller, who has kind of a long history in kind of the cable world. They've gone into a lot of markets.
Chekanoja started it. Barry's just a minor investor.
Okay. Well, why don't you give us a little bit of history about Aereo, Alki, and just what FilmOn has done as well, because you were a friend of the briefing for the Supreme Court, but you have a pretty competitive service from Aereo, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, originally the Aereo service started as Bamboom, and it deployed micro antennas in New York in the Second Circuit, as it's better known now in the world of retransmission, or not retransmission, as the argument might be. I think that the most important issue in this, from a legal point of view, is that this is not a workaround. This is abiding by the law, which are the same thing to a lot of people, but one has got entirely different connotations to the other. Abiding by the law and a loophole are two very, very different axioms, right? Now, from the point of view of Aereo is now in about 5 or 6 cities. FilmOn, my company, is in about 18. We have been in this space, we've been in litigation, rather, with the major network since 2010. If you remember, a company called IBI launched itself as we did at the same time, but with a mobile service, offering ourselves as a virtual cable system. And then the major networks argued that we were not a cable system. Now they are arguing that we are a cable system and should be regulated as such. And we have no problem with that. And I think that that's a fundamental difference between Aereo and FilmOn. FilmOn pays for content. We license content. Aereo does not. And I think that there is a rub there. But, the conversation is a huge, complex issue that goes far beyond. I think that Ben and I had a conversation about that recently, and I think it goes into a far deeper territory than just simple copyright issues, which are somewhat of an excuse, I think. So I've talked enough.
Ben, do you want to join in and talk about some of the coverage that you've done? I mean, you really said that this is about broadcasters and about media consolidation, really, and kind of media control of content and the airwaves.
Yeah, that's correct. I think that if you go back to the digital TV transition back a few years ago, about a half decade ago, they essentially made it so the environment was anti-competitive. So if they really want to call it a workaround, that's fine legally. But there is really no other way to broadcast television now and to receive television other than to cut into those pipelines. And this was the only other way to do what they were doing. So Aereo created a space for itself where it did not previously exist. When I believe cable companies and larger media companies thought that this fight was over, that they had essentially effectively bought like any kind of media transmission capability that is possible. And Alki and I have talked about this. This was the way to continue the democratization of media by creating an alternative, creating some sort of competitive secondary option. And media outlets didn't really see it because it was a little tricky the way they figured out a way to do it. But now they're just trying to quash it. That's really what it is. That's what it's come down to.
And why did the U.S. government come out on the side of the broadcast? I understand why the broadcasters are fighting Aereo, Film On, and other services like that. But why would the government kind of come down on the side of broadcasters, do you think?
It's a political move, like anything in politics. You have to support the ones who are going to feed your next campaign. To go out against them would ensure, suicide.
Right. And the other thing is, I think, first of all, the courts have ruled in Aereo's favor consistently. They've yet to shut it down. So that the courts and the government are separate. But the governments, in this specific example, we ran a story last night about how the FCC and Comcast, for example, has a revolving door. The VP of Governmental Affairs of Comcast right now is the previous commissioner of one of the 5 previous commissioners of the FCC, and she was done in 2011. She couldn't lobby for 2 years legally, and in 20 Comcast. And that's again, that's one of 5 employees that works for Comcast now that was previously an FCC employee. And it goes in the other direction. So it's solely money. That's really what it is. It comes down basically to money. And Alki, I don't know if you want to back that up or go in a different direction or what's up.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's important to understand that these are public channels, and that the airwaves that they sit in are owned by the public and not by the corporations that are fighting the whole issue of making these public channels available to the people. The broadcasters were given this spectrum based on what the Broadcast Act says of '73, and the Broadcast Act says that these channels must be freely made available by any means possible. And it's not about copyright. You cannot steal something that is given away for free. Period. And it's an issue of protecting the cable system. It's an issue of protecting a business model that is wrapped around the Nielsen system, and the Nielsen rating system is the most flawed ratings system possible, but it drives a huge industry of advertiser funds, and that any other way would have to completely reinvent the business model, which is what this type of media is forcing.
And Dan, I want to bring you into the conversation too. You cover a lot of different streaming companies. What do you think about Aereo, what they've done so far, what their potential is, and what this case might mean for the streaming industry?
Well, I kind of find it funny everyone wants to argue about what the courts are going to do, what's legal, what's not legal. I don't really speculate on any of that because I'm not a lawyer. My guess is just as good as anybody as to what will happen, what should happen, what could happen. I tend to look at the business and the technology behind it. Let's say that Aereo is deemed legal. Okay, the problem Aereo has is the business out there that they're going after, there's not enough large enough market for these services. Consumers want choice. They want breadth of catalog and content. Netflix has proven that. Aereo has a couple channels at most that anybody would want to watch in a city. They've had trouble rolling out in cities. They're 7 months behind in Chicago. They've raised $100 million to date. They're not even at 1 million subs. So when the CEO and Diller says that they want to get to 20 to 25 million users, just think about what their cost per subscriber acquisition is going to be. How are they going to compete with cable when cable's advertising, print, online, TV, in person, radio? I mean, these guys are going to have to raise so much money, but the bigger issue that they're going to have is scaling the service. I mean, they're having capacity issues or had capacity issues in New York City, and they're at a very small number of subscribers. So I take a step back. I don't look at whether or not this is a privacy issue, whether someone's stealing content. I don't know why people get so upset over the fact that that they're surprised that the cable companies have so much power. They always have. That's the way it works. This is all about greed. That's always been the case. It's about protecting business models, protecting your source of revenue. That's something the industries, large industries, cable, mobile, fixed, all these guys have done for years. But I tend to just look at the business. I don't think there's a profitable, successful business model for Aereo.
I would say that they've built an excellent brand. I would echo your sentiment about the business. I mean, I know because we are in 18 cities. We offer the same channels, certainly in New York, completely for free. And we know that the average age of network television audience is 50 plus, right? And our demographic is males 18 to 40. Our primary demographic is males 18 to 40. That's the internet, the primary internet audience. And so.
How many subscribers do you have so far?
We're a free model. We have over 40 million uniques, according to Blue Kai, which is a highly respected measurement system. We have over 40 million uniques worldwide. About 22 million are in the U.S. But remember that we have over 600 channels and 45,000 video-on-demand titles where we have that offering that Dan was talking about.
And Andrew, why don't you weigh in a little bit on where the consumer stands? We've talked about the business part, and we know this is all about business and money and the entrenched interest in cable and broadcast, etc. Where does the consumer, where is the voice of the consumer in all this? You need to unmute.
Can you hear me okay now, Mark?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think what Dan says is correct. I mean, the funny thing about this, I think a lot of people are looking at not as Aereo specifically, the company that's going to be the dominant one or the actual leader in this area, but what it represents, right? It's the fact that I think folks who are in this business or are new to this business trying to break up the established market dominance of these big guys are looking to the courts for a direction and for less uncertainty about how they're thinking about this, right? So if you look at the lower court decisions, it seems like Aereo has been in the winning side of things, and it was actually Aereo that decided, yeah, let's go to the big guys, let's go to the Supreme Court and get this known for good so we can go forward. So there's a lot of companies looking on the outside seeing what kind of precedents this might set for folks. But I think there's some worry there in that if you looked at some of the specific questions and comments from the Supreme Court justices, referring to things like the iCloud or not knowing the disposition of HBO, it kind of worries you that these are the folks making the decisions for the future of entertainment and information online. So I'm hoping that they'll actually just say, we don't know what we're talking about. The lower courts got it right. Let's just let them deal with this. I don't know what I'm interested to hear what you folks think.
Whoa! You're talking about even less educated, technologically retarded courts. At least you've got several heads together who can try and figure something out, as opposed to one. And in most, and as the networks would have it, for us, for example, in Washington D.C., we were given a near nationwide ban for the major networks by a woman who's completely technologically inept and didn't even give us a hearing, and still gave us a nationwide, and called me personally. What was it? She called me uncouth.
That's not possible.
No, I didn't know that was illegal.
So it's a disaster either way, you're saying.
Right.
But by the way, I want to get back to Dan's point a little bit here, if that's possible, about how
sure.
The efficacy of Aereo versus every other cable network. I don't think it's about that. I think it's about a much larger idea of a couple of companies throughout the world owning two kinds of pipes that run underneath all of America and essentially all of the world, and can dictate then what kind of speech comes out of those pipes. That has been happening with television. We essentially democratized this with the internet, and now they're trying to essentially regulate the internet. If you regulate the internet, that's fine, but then speech doesn't become an issue of unpopular speech versus popular speech, or speech that we can regulate because it's hateful or whatever. It becomes an issue of if speech is expensive enough. That's really what it is. And they don't believe currently that it's expensive enough. So this will, I think the difference is, and Dan made an absolutely very good point here. It's always been like this. Cable nets are not evil. They are just trying to, they're simply trying to hold on to that one thing they hold dear, which is a cable pipeline and a big bundle. And the big bundle will allow people, if they can, for these couple of cable companies to continue to exist forever. But the difference is, without competition, we've already seen it. Cable and internet prices skyrocket, and that affects an average consumer about $100 a month. It's increased 126% since 1995.
And this is all in the context of the FCC now coming out and saying they're going to change the net neutrality rules basically to allow a fast lane. So this is all happening really
at a premium.
Right. Exactly.
The 99% of the population, right?
Right. So for example, there was no, for cable back in the day, there was no innovation that you could do on cable. Like you could start a digital TV station, and that's pretty much it. You could start another TV station. But the innovation that you can do on the internet, which they are now trying to regulate, this is all one big thing. Remember, the Aereo thing has to do with this in the same exact way. The internet that they're now trying to regulate doesn't just have to do with starting a digital TV network or whatever. It has to do with the Internet of Things. And if it prohibits awesome things like a Nest from coming up, from like amazing advancements that happen in your home for like medical devices and things like that as well. If that's prohibited because there's a barrier to entry, there's like an entry fee to get a business on the internet, then that's where this starts. That's what the larger issue is here. And it all comes back to this one idea of the hegemonization of media. If they're all going to be four companies, there's no competition. So you can't go back. You can't go back once it's there.
And I mean, Nest might not be the best example. They're now owned by Google.
Right. I mean,
Google
whatever Nest could eventually
become. You're right. Yeah. Your point's totally taken. I'm just curious. Do you guys? How would you handicap? I mean, we're not lawyers, obviously, but we all followed what's going on. Does anyone think that the broadcasters will win this?
Well, there's no way to know. I mean, just look at what the FCC put out today. They say that their notice will propose the following, that ISPs may not act in a commercially unreasonable manner to harm the internet. What does that mean?
That's intentionally vague language, exactly.
Right. So, I mean, we're kind of all sitting around wondering what's actually going to take place, what's the language, what's affected, what isn't. People are talking about privacy, freedom of speech, saving the internet. You got Netflix putting things out there like using words like unprecedented, which aren't accurate. There's so much confusion out there because we don't really know what's going to happen that it's really hard to speculate and guess as to what the outcome is. But I think it goes back to no matter what the outcome is, there's a business behind the outcome.
I think we can speculate as to what would happen if certain things do happen, right? Like the restriction of freedom of speech. If the businesses that, and I'd be really interested to hear what Fanny thinks, because she's sitting in her underground lair there, not nodding knowingly. So I'd be really interested to see what she has to say about it.
About net neutrality?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, this has a lot to do with that. I think that it has to do with taking control of something that has traditionally been controlled by very few people.
I think
Fanny, you're actually an Aereo subscriber. I'm curious like why you subscribe and whether you like it. Because after we basically just spent the time slamming the service and how poor it is, do you like it?
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed that. And part of the reason was because the pipes here weren't that good today. They couldn't facilitate me connecting to you.
You didn't pay for your fast lane connection.
I didn't do that. I use Aereo as part of a mix. I use it. I live in New York, but for whatever reason, I can't get a lot of broadcast channels on my TV. I don't pay for cable. I never have. I don't really want to, especially because when I was coming of age and making my own purchasing decisions about media, the internet came along. So I've had things like Netflix, I download things, I stream things, but there still is appointment television on broadcast that I want to be able to see. And because I can't pick up the reception, Aereo is a really great alternative to that. And I think that it's priced well enough so that for somebody who is used to paying around 10 to 20 bucks a month for something like Netflix, Aereo fits into that.
Why would you not go to a service like Filmon.com that offers...
I didn't know about you guys, but I think that what you offer is really cool.
Completely for free.
I see that. I'm going to use you.
We offer so much more.
And you're not in an underground bunker. It looks like you're actually at WNYC.
I am.
Do they have underground bunkers there?
I can't tell you.
So,
is that where they keep Robert Horwich? Isn't it an underground bunker?
Oh, always. Yeah.
Okay, so I couldn't get anyone to bite on handicapping the Supremes, but let's talk a little bit more about Netflix and what they're doing. They just came out with this great quarter results with more subscribers, and so they've decided that they should charge everyone more. What do you guys think about this strategy of theirs, and also simultaneously complaining about now AT&T seems to be, I don't know if they're throttling them, they just don't have the same agreement they had with Comcast, which we talked about before. So it seems like Netflix, they're doing great, but they've got complaints flying in every direction.
That's what Netflix does, they complain. I mean, let's put it, the facts out there. So Netflix complains that AT&T basically won't allow them to have as much capacity as they want in their network at no cost to Netflix, but at a cost to AT&T. Now, if you get into the content delivery business, which Netflix is in, one of the things you have to do is pay for access. It's the way the internet's worked for 20 years. Google does it, AOL does it, Yahoo does it, everybody.
As is AT&T, Dan.
As in AT&T. Now, Akamai, the largest CDN on the planet, 20% of the traffic that they cover that gets delivered goes through Akamai. When Akamai wanted to get access into AT&T's network, they spent $100 million to get access over a 5-year period to put their servers inside the last mile. So Netflix is complaining about something, but none of the CDNs behind them, Google, Akamai, or any of these companies, are backing them up with a statement that they think it should be free. Netflix is the only company we've heard from publicly, besides Cogent, who's a transit provider, who thinks that this should be free. How come we're not hearing from content owners? How come we're not hearing from CDN? So it's the way the internet works. Now, if Netflix wants to say the internet interconnection deal should change because fundamentally the internet's changed over 20 years and there's a better and different way to do it that's more fair, that's an okay argument. But the problem is they haven't outlined how they want it to change. They simply say they want stronger, without defining it, rules. So do they mean they want interconnection deals regulated? Do they want them monitored? Do they want them, do they want an SLA with them? Do they want a QoS to make sure that somebody's actually, applying it properly? No details.
Well, according to, broadband providers or cable providers, they're supposed to provide a certain level of service that they have never, in my knowledge anyway, have never ever delivered.
Now you're talking two different things. See, that's the problem here.
But we're not talking two different things at all.
Yes, you are.
No, we're talking about infrastructure. And if the broadband, if the phone companies or the cable companies had the infrastructure that they purport to have, Netflix wouldn't be complaining. There wouldn't be any complaint.
Yes, they would. Because we're talking about two things.
They probably would. They probably would find a reason. I do.
Well, that's the problem, is people are bringing in speeds, last mile speeds to the conversation. The last mile speed is completely different than interconnections, which connects outside of the network's actual last mile. So we're talking two completely different things that are grouped into the conversation.
Well, it also depends on the technology and the protocol you're using, because the last mile issue is really dependent on if you're close enough to a node of the network, like Netflix has a huge CDN partnership, that it's almost certain that there will be a node within the last mile nowadays. I mean, there are so many data centers in the city of New York, for example, that you can conceivably.
Ben, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, that's part of it. CDNs don't have any consumer-focused interest in actually making sure their speed is fast. It's nice for them. Like they're B2B people. It's nice for them if speed is faster, but at the end of the day, every business that I've ever worked with or worked at that delivers video over the internet uses Akamai. They don't really need to be faster than they are. It's a luxury good for them at that point. So for Netflix has to put on a show, more or less. If people have buffering issues and things like that, they can just say like, oh, this is a server-side issue. We're working on this. And here's this press release that says we're working on this thing. So it's important for them on that side. But I agree with you. Of course CDN should take a stand. That'd be really nice. But it doesn't really serve their interest to do it.
So this could just be kind of a negotiating tactic in a way for Netflix, and eventually maybe they'll make a deal with AT&T somewhere down the line.
Right? Yeah, I think so.
Sure. So how do you guys handicap this new streaming network from AT&T? I find it hard to believe that AT&T is going to come up with something. I mean, they're working with Churning Group, has a little bit of background and has this Crunchyroll service. But what do you think about the prospects for this one?
Well, by the way, the Churning Group years ago were front runners to buy Hulu. They tried to drum up a lot of support.
That's right.
Through a couple of different channels to go and buy that. They've been in this game for a long time, and I think they see if you can go in these little continually diverse little segments. Crunchyroll is one of them. If you can sort of fill in these niche areas and build up a subscriber base that way, and then start to have the funds that Netflix does to go and compete, maybe for the original programming, things like that. It's possible. Something they could do. But that's far down the line. It's hard to compete now. I think if you want to make a true video subscription service that isn't doing something like what Aereo or Filmon is doing, you have to have massive coffers. AT&T has huge coffers, but they'd have to reappropriate a lot of them to do this thing.
So you feel like the Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, I mean, those are the entrenched streaming services for consumers, and that it's very, very hard to break into that.
If you think about what content costs, yes. I mean, the Simpsons deal that just happened with FX, that's essentially a $1 billion content deal for one television show. So multiply that by however many titles Netflix or Hulu or Amazon has. So it's almost impossible to get in here, and I think that's why that's why again the Aereo thing matters to me so much, is that Netflix found a way in. They put their head down and they found their way into this market that did not exist, and they are now players in it. Google did the same thing, but they already had money from all the tech endeavors they've done previously. Hulu is owned by the networks, so if you're talking about trying to create a larger media company or a media company that's anything smaller than like a mom and pop style media company at this point, it's basically impossible. So that's why the Aereo stuff really matters at this point. You have to find tricky ways in. They found a tricky way in. Hopefully they're allowed to keep doing it.
Last year at CES, Microsoft commented publicly that they were working on a live TV or linear service or Xbox Live, but after talking to all the content owners, the cost to acquire content was so much that they said they'd never be able to make money on it. It would never be profitable. So AT&T is going to spend $500 million. Yeah, good luck, because remember, wasn't Intel supposed to be rolling out some sort of TV service?
Right.
The media went all crazy about it, and that didn't work. Sony, I've yet to see anything from them, so I don't think we can give any of these guys credit until we see something.
The only way it can happen, I think, is if somebody buckles down. Maybe it's Microsoft, maybe it's for Xbox Live, and they go and get a sports contract. They go and they spend the many $billion that it costs to get the NBA or the NFL or the MLB, and they say this is exclusively on here. The Super Bowl is on here. It's not the NFL.
They can't,
but they can't. That is seriously. That's what would have to be.
Locked up for what, 20, 30 years now?
Right, exactly. So that's what it would have to be. You'd have to go to the NBA, essentially. Not the NHL, it wouldn't matter that much. You have to go to the NBA and wait till that TNT contract ends in 2022, I think. And you'd have to wait. You just have to throw money at it. And that's really the only way to do it. You have to have an indispensable style of content.
But then the question is, how would they make that money back? Because when MLB's
you wouldn't. That's the thing.
Right,
you can't make the money back. You would just.
So why would you do it?
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea why you do it.
It would be a lost leader. I mean, here in Los Angeles, for example, we've got Time Warner has. I've just had a complete brain implosion. Has licensed the exclusive rights to one of the local basketball teams here. As part of their channel lineup, as being an exclusive sports offering. So obviously there's a lot of truth to be said in that, and maybe it's regionalized, maybe it's maybe the downlink capacity problems is a combination of free to air or FTA signals or like ATSC signals combined with IP delivery. I think that I'm a sincere believer that the combination of traditional broadcast and IP technology is going to have to be the bridge that's going to give enough capacity for these networks to operate in the future.
Yeah, and I mean AT&T, they might have some of the infrastructure there and some of the delivery, but where's the content is what it comes down to when it comes to a lot of these streaming things. Do you have the library that everyone's looking for?
Right, and they don't have the delivery because they resell Akamai. So.
It's going to be more eclectic than that, isn't it? It's going to end up being more, it's going to end up being more diverse. I mean, and like you have very, there are so many set-top boxes out there now, right? I mean, Amazon's just rolled out their set-top box to compete with Roku and the 10,000 other set-top boxes that are out there. Set-top, what is a set-top? And now you've got them in the form of USB, and then you've got Chromecast, and you've got whatever. Popping out, everything. Markets are going to be segmented by technology and by content preferences, and and profiles and patterns.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks everyone. I really appreciate you joining us. Sorry for some of the technical glitches. It's the fun of Google Hangouts. It's a great discussion. We'll definitely be following up to see what happens to Aereo and Film On. And this new AT&T startup, as well as the latest complaints that Netflix will be lodging with everyone. So I want to thank our panel, Alki David joining us from Film On, Ben Collins from Esquire Magazine, Dan Rayburn from Streaming Media, Fanny Cohen, our MediaTwits producer, and also Andrew Lee popping in and out of for the discussion from American University. You can catch us every week on Friday for the podcast. You can find us at MediaShift.org, PBS MediaShift, and we'll catch you all next week. Thanks, everyone.